Wow, how good was that property? And it is just down the road from where we're sitting right now, and will be on the market this weekend for people to have a look at. So make sure you check it out. Joining me in the studio, if you've just tuned in, is Chris Gill from Courses Solicitors, and Chris is our man to talk about all things property. Chris, an email that we've had in, and this is a good one, it's probably quite a long one, but I want to buy a property at auction, and it'll be the first time I've bid at an auction. What legal obligations do I need to be aware of? Now, I know we've covered off on a bit of that in the last episode, or the last segment, but let's rattle off most of the things there that are important for him to take on board.
Okay, yeah, I think the first part with the auction is because you don't have the benefit of a cooling off period, then the documents that you'll be required to sign if you're the successful bidder, firstly there's the contract, which details everything that you need to know. It'll have the settlement dates, you know, and whatever you've negotiated, if you've had the chances, inclusions, exclusions, really important. You need to know if the vendor is going to be taking, you know, some of the light fittings or the curtains, the matching curtains. So they're important things that you need to know before you really put your hand up to bid.
And maybe a spot where agents, if there's something defective in the property, might note, purchaser is aware that the oven doesn't work or something like that. So
and the vendor may not be intending to fix it.
Yes.
Encroachments.
Yes.
Very important. You want to know if fences are not on boundaries. You know, the vendor may not be aware of those things, but if they are aware, they are required to disclose it.
Definitely.
So those things in the contract are important. Swimming pool fences, very important, because a vendor's obligation to have a swimming pool compliant for fencing before settlement, not before the auction, but before settlement. So the purchaser wants to know, okay, how's that going to be done?
Certainly.
And that can often be disclosed in the contract.
Best practice to attach a quote, or what would you suggest?
Yeah, I think that's not a bad way of doing it, because at least the purchaser's aware of what the vendor intends to do.
Yes.
And as long as everyone knows what everyone is going to
planning,
do, then you haven't got a problem. It's only when people have an expectation without discussion, and then those expectations aren't reached. That's when the problems always arise. And that's the same with everything when in property related. Vendors have an expectation, purchasers have an expectation, they don't always meet.
Yeah. Often.
So you've got the first one is the contract. You have to read that.
Yes.
And also then the second document is the Form 1. That's a vendor disclosure statement under regulation. It details mortgages to be discharged. If there's a tenant, is the tenant going to be there? Encumbrances that may be registered on a title, might have some building restrictions. All those things are disclosed. They're complicated. They're not easy for a purchaser without knowledge to understand. So certainly for a first-time bidder, they would have to go and get some advice so that they're aware of all their obligations as a buyer. So I guess they're the key parts, the documents and the auction terms. That's on display at the agent's office and also just before the auction. So you have plenty of opportunity to review. If you don't review, well then you can't help people from themselves.
The opportunity is there all the same.
That's right.
And before the auction, obviously building inspections, finance should all be tidied up and put in place?
Certainly, you need to be able to go and make sure you've kicked and prodded the property. If you want to have a building inspection to check out all those things you want to know, you get the opportunity to speak to council. If you're buying it to develop it or to put an extension or maybe put a pool, go and speak to council, make sure it complies with any zoning changes that you've got. So all those things are there for you to go and have a look at. So there's plenty of opportunity. If you fail to do it, you really can't blame anyone other than yourself.
No, well, exactly. And then of course, on the day, register.
Yes.
Select your preferred settlement date if you've negotiated, and deposit.
And and all those things all agreed. If you have to register, you can't bid at an auction with the changes that were recently made to legislation without registering as a bidder. If you're not comfortable bidding, you can go and get someone to bid on your behalf.
Good point.
So you can go and maybe get a valuer. A valuer is a good person because they can give you an indication of what they think the property is worth. Because your bank might give you pre-approval, but if you go and overspend your limit, as an auction, you may not really know what the property is going to go for. So a valuer can give you some indication of price, which is useful. They can also bid on your behalf. They're experienced. They know how the auction process works, and make sure you don't get caught up and maybe don't bid when you wish you had bid because the property gets sold.
And as a proxy bidder, they need to register, obviously, as well.
They do, and they need to disclose who they're bidding for.
Yes.
It can be awkward if you're trying to buy your neighbour's property. You can't do it quietly anymore. You have to nominate who you're bidding for.
There is one little, if you like, loophole, I guess, is that if the proxy bidder was bold enough to sign the contract,
yes.
They could get away without disclosing who the end purchaser might be, I guess.
Yeah, that is one option. However, the person who signs the contract is liable
Always
to the
responsible
vendor for completion under the contract.
Yeah,
so you'd want to do it with someone you knew very well. So
yeah, you want to be very good friends
careful.
and be very well assured.
And make sure they got a lot of money. Yeah.
Yes. And then beyond settlement, clearly they need then to appoint a conveyancer.
Yes, yeah. So then the normal settlement process continues.
Yeah.
So the conveyancer would be given the copies of the sales documents, seek instructions about title and how you'd be registered on the title, joint tenants, tenants in common, all of those things that are then organised between the auction date and the settlement date.
And you liaise with the bank,
Yeah,
of
and
course.
liaise with the bank if they're getting finance and provide the bank with descriptions of the purchaser's information.
And on
So-
settlement day, everyone's happy. Keys get handed over.
Hand it over, we have the good news and ring up the agent and the vendor, the purchaser and say, yes, settlement's happened.
Yep.
It's all yours.
Crack a bottle of champagne and enjoy.
And they can move in any time after about 1 o'clock. That's
Good.
the question we always get asked.
What time?
What time do
exactly.
we settle?
Yeah.
Settlement's usually between 11:30 and 12:30.
Yep.
To be sure, make about 1 o'clock for collection of keys.
Excellent.
And we have a lot of happy people.
Beautiful. Well, Chris, thanks for coming in. Good to have another chat with you.
Pleasure.
And that fountain of knowledge, if anyone needs to speak to you, courses, and you're always got the answers, which is great.
Thanks for having me, Tim.
Now we're going to have a look at some of our hot properties. Well, that's it for today's show. And don't forget, if you missed anything that you'd like to catch up on, you can always sign up for our podcast. And next week, if you're looking around in the hills, don't miss next week's episode. We're at Crafers West for a beautiful home there. So we'll see you next week, right here, Wednesday, 1 p.m. on TOOP TV.